ये लाइव है क्या? लाइव plan and priorities. It's unit 5. Yes. Unit 5, plans and priorities. After this, there is state government administration. So in plan and planning has evolved in India with time, and how, uh, starting from the planning commission after independence to the present day Niti Aayog, how these things are changing. Plus, how uh, planning has changed after Panchayati Raj, 73rd and 74th constitutional amendment has been brought in. And with Panchayati Raj institutions coming in, how planning has also become very much decentralized in nature. Now, when it comes to planning, planning is a very socialist term. So, whatever we studied under, what do you say, policy making. Okay? From policy making, when we do it for a long term, when we view what the government is going to do in the long term, and we establish method for it, it's called planning. So for example, we'll study today a few things. For example, we used to have those 5-year plans. After independence, we used to have those 5-year plans where the government had used to decide for the next 5 years where the government's focus will be. All the PSUs that we have, how will those PSUs be used? So every 5 years, we used to make plan for the next 5 years. For this, planning commission was constituted, and it was attached. It was like a separate body alongside the cabinet. And this planning commission was headed by the chairman of the planning commission. But essentially, planning commission was used as a body that used to control all kinds of policy making in the government at the top level. Plus, it used to have a lot of power to give out finances. For example, right now, it is the finance ministry that decides how much money is to be allocated to which ministry, and then budget gets passed. When planning commission was there, planning commission used to have significant influence on this allocation of resources. Which ministry will get what, which department will get what. And then it used to get passed in the parliament. That was the role of the planning commission, so it was very significant. In planning commission, what used to happen during the UPA government was, it was like a parallel office of the prime minister. So the prime minister's office was there. Somebody was the prime minister. Manmohan Singh was the prime minister. But in planning commission also, planning commission was a different power center altogether of the ruling party. This planning commission was focused on very top-down levels of policy making. So, for example, when we start now plans and priorities, we'll study that. First, let's discuss whatever the issues we had left yesterday in terms of union government and administration. First issue was delegated legislation. We'll finish that. Finish that. Then we'll move on to plans and priorities. So, delegated legislation. Delegated legislation. Now, what is delegated legislation? We have understood, I mean, polity you all must have read, that in a parliament, parliament has the legislative powers or law making powers. When this, now what does delegation mean? Delegation means uh, giving away the power for a temporary period of time. That is what delegation means. Now, under delegated legislation, what happens is, you all know that from the parliament, some people are selected and they are made into the executive. This executive is called what? Cabinet ministers, council of ministers, it's called. Now, parliament meets 3 times a year in India. Yes. Rest of the times, it is the executive that is running the show, isn't it? Now, if a urgent challenge comes up and decision making has to be done, yes, urgent challenge comes up and decision making has to be done. Should the executive wait for the next 3 months or 2 months whenever the parliament meet and voting happens? Those things happen? No, right? So if an emerging challenge comes, emerging challenge is dealt with then and there. Similarly, everyday operations or day-to-day operations. Day-to-day operations, uh, these day-to-day operations have a significant amount of, what do you say? So these day-to-day operations are dealt with by the executive, and everything does not go back to the parliament. What is important goes back to the parliament. So the parliament, what it does is, whenever parliament makes a law, for example, GST. Now, parliament made a skeleton framework of GST. In this GST framework, parliament will make some skeletal structures. Okay, so these things will be the GST and how these things are. Whatever, uh, I mean, broad language, they'll make a law, and that law will be passed, will become an act. But for the day-to-day operations, executive has the power to fill in some of the blanks that are there in the GST. So, by filling in these blanks, by bringing in more details, for example, bringing out circulars, bringing out memorandums, the executive brings in these day-to-day operational things so as to make the law more operational and more detailed. This uh, form of law making that executive does is called delegated legislation, because parliament does not meet every day, executive works every day. Okay? So that is delegated legislation, that you delegate some of the legislative powers. Parliament delegates some of the legislative power to the executive. It's called delegated legislation. Okay? What are the issues with this? Now, of course, if you delegate some of the power to a particular body that meets every day, that means essentially that body will exercise a lot of power. Now, this is a challenge that is asked in your exam. The issues with delegated legislation. First, see, let's go to the definition first. Delegated legislation, often described as a necessary evil, refers to law making power conferred by the legislature, that is the parliament, upon the executive or other subordinate bodies. In modern welfare state, parliament cannot legislate every single detail due to lack of time, technical expertise, and the need for flexibility. it passes the Parent Act, that is the Skeleton Act, and delegates the power to make the detailed rules, regulations, and bylaws to the administration. Detailed rules, regulation, and bylaws to the administration. So administration will take care of whatever is needed. So let's take another example to make it more clearer. Parliament has made a law to improve what do you say, girl child attendance in school. Okay? They have made a particular law, skeleton law, or they have passed an act, girl child. So that girl child, female representation or attendance level in primary schools, secondary schools, and higher secondary schools are higher to increase it. Now, different districts have different challenges as to why females are not coming to school. At times, there can be problems such as infrastructure. There is no separate toilet for women. So that's why females aren't coming. There can be in one particular district, there might be a problem that the parents are not allowing girl child to go to school because there is some cultural element in it. In other places, it might be that it is quite unsafe in class for women. So different challenges are there in different states, different districts, etc., etc. Or other challenge might be that in other places, some places might be that girl child is engaged in, for example, helping their mother in agriculture. Yes, because 80% of agricultural labor is done by women in India. This can be another factor. There can be diverse factor for this. So what is exactly a factor in a particular district or in a particular state? The administration has to maneuver this particular law according to that. Right? So they bring in new rules, regulation to fill the gaps that this law has. This power is called delegated legislation. Are you able to understand now? This delegated legislation, the problems that are arising out of it is first, erosion of separation of power. Now, separation of power says what? Legislature does lawmaking, executive executes those laws, and judiciary assesses whether those laws are made in a right way or not and checks the power of executive and legislature. That is the job they had. This is where the executive is taking over the law, the role of the legislature. Separation of power is being challenged. Second, the key word that you guys need to use in your answer is called new despotism. This is the classic critique. Basically, Lord Hayward, he said that the bureaucracy was becoming a new despot by acquiring lawmaking powers, making it unaccountable to people. Why? Because the bureaucracy is not elected by the people. Yes. Because they are not elected by the people, they do not have any form of direct accountability to them. Of course, politicians control those bureaucrats, but their control is also limited because Parliament is giving out lawmaking powers to them. And Parliament does not have the expertise required to make them accountable. Are you able to understand? That is why Lord Hayward will say them that this is what new despotism looks like. Despotism means what? Despotism or a despot means the person having unchecked power, arbitrary exercise of power. Okay? Opposite of that would be something like limit on that power, constitutionalism. Third challenge under this, these are traditional points, we'll also read some new points. Skeletal or blanket legislation. Now I'm repeating skeletal legislation. What is that? Parliament often passes vague Parents Act giving blanket or blank check powers to the executive. For example, Parliament writes a very vague line. Its interpretation, everyday interpretation, will be on the bureaucracy to do whatever they want to do with the executive. So this is also a problem, that it has given a culture of creating skeletal structures or blanket legislation, giving blank checks to the executive to fill in. There is a particular clause, and this term, the Henry VIII clause, it might directly be asked in your question. It might directly ask you in the question for Henry VIII clause. You just remember this is delegated legislation. Remember this. A problematic form of delegation that has emerged with time is that where the Parent Act includes a clause allowing the executive to make rules that can amend or repeal provisions of the Parent Act itself. It effectively allows the executive to overrule the legislature. Basically, for example, a legislature has made a law, uh, whatever, for example, that GST law, or that girl child attendance law they have made. Now, within it, if there is a clause saying if executive finds something that is not relevant in this particular scenario, in this particular law, executive can overrule it and put in some new regulation. Basically, this clause will say what? Will do what? If executive is not agreeing every day with whatever legislature has written down in the law, the executive can overrule it. Understood? This particular provision gives it significant amount of power. This makes it a new despot or new despotism. Henry VIII clause. Remember this. And whenever you write answers in delegated legislation, wherever you write, even GS also, use these two words: new despotism, Henry VIII clause, blanket or skeletal legislation. Use these keywords. In GS2 also, delegated legislation, you will get questions to use these words. Inadequate parliamentary scrutiny, the sheer volume of delegated legislation is overwhelming. The laying procedure, where rules are tabled in the parliament, is often a mere formality, and MPs rarely have the time or technical expertise to scrutinize them. For example, there is a there is of course it's a rule that whatever the executive make, it is laid before the parliament so that parliamentarians can check it. Do you think such a huge is India's administrative structure? Do you think parliament has the time to do so? They don't usually. So that is why uh, slaying procedure is a problem. Sub-delegation, it's an extreme dilution of accountability. The ministry further delegates the rule-making power to the secretariat or things like that. So, who has delegated this power to the ministry? Parliament. Huh? Parliament has delegated this power to the ministry. Ministry is further delegating this power to the department. And here, the executive is doing all its work. Executive means permanent executive. This is where new despotism is happening. Because of this sub-delegation. Because of course, the minister, the cabinet minister does not have time to do these everyday regulations or rules. They do not have time to do so. It is done. Are you able to understand what the issues are, what the problems are? Plus, there is lack of public consultation. Rules are often drafted by bureaucrats in secrecy without consulting the interest or the public that will be affected by them. Are you able to understand? Now, of course, these are traditional points under delegated legislation that we can write. But I mean, for a better answer, you can of course club those 7 points into 3 or 4 points. Under new despot, you can write sub-delegation as a point. Okay? There are some new points that we also have. Now, delegated legislation. So the problem with paper 2 is the questions are very open-ended. Okay? It is up to you how much you can write. So ideally, you should write the most cutting-edge things. Okay? Because they have opened it up from you. So that is what will fetch you significant amount of marks. Algorithmic governance and black box state. Uh, yeah, just remind me after class to add another point that delegation of legislation or lawmaking is also through done by giving out these functions to global consultancies like BCG, McKinsey, Bain. Has been done. Just write it down and remind me at the end. Delegation. Let me just type it myself. Huh. Algorithmic governance and the black box state is the most significant and emerging challenge. Voice went away. Rabe, what was the last thing that you heard? What was I teaching the last? The voice got uh, stuck. Fine. Sleepy. How many classes are you doing these days? No, not optional. No, not this class. One GS, one optional. What GS are you studying? Really different class. Where are you studying? Yeah. What all have you finished till now? Arey Rabe, I am asking you, what was the last thing you heard? Rabe is saying Vision IAS. Oh man. Algorithms. Okay. Okay. We haven't moved forward yet. You haven't missed out anything, but good to know, Rabe. Studying. Sorry. You like GS too? Hmm. Uh, Facial recognition technology. Okay? Facial recognition technology. Uh, Whenever that technology was built, or whoever built it, a company must have built it. The technology they built, they use some training data. You understand training data? For example, if you have to train a particular facial recognition model, so how will he, for example, I show your face and it has to find your face in so many other faces. That means there has to be some data that has to be fed into it, right? Okay, this person looks different. This person looks different. Some data has to be uh, trained. It has to be trained with some data. That's called training data. What happened was, especially in New York municipality, the facial recognition model the law enforcement there was using, that was most of the facial recognition models have been trained by companies, especially with faces that are white. Means uh, people who are, I mean, racially fair skinned whites in America, their faces, the training data is filled with their faces. So that facial recognition technology did not know how exactly to deal with African American faces. One skin color is very fair, one skin color is very dark. The facial recognition is only trained in dark colors, in fair skinned training data. When it was applied, the mistakes it did in recognizing the faces of African Americans was significant. So that means there was a racial bias in the training data, making the technology itself racially biased. It is very much accurate when it comes to recognizing people of European or Caucasian descent, but when it comes to African American descent, uh, it wasn't able to do so very well. That means training data itself is a problem. This particular facial recognition technology in this case is a black box, right? You feed a problem, you expect a solution. We usually don't know what exactly is going on inside it, how it is recognizing it. Okay, so that is why it's called a black box. We can't see what exactly is going on within it. So this is why facial recognition technology there was criticized a lot. And then they started training using training data having faces of African American population. Understood? Challenge with this black box or algorithms based governance is that scrutiny is impossible. Parliament can't just take out the source code and see what exactly is the problem. They do not have this expertise. Secondly, accountability is very much diffused. Who is accountable? Is the department accountable, minister accountable, or the company who made it was accountable, or the company who provided training data is accountable, or the officer who was using this was accountable? Nobody. Accountability is not fixed. Judicial review is difficult. Frank Pascal wrote a book called The Black Box Society, argues that this opacity creates immense power for the few who control these algorithms. Yes, he warns that this leads to automated, unaccountable decision making that can perpetuate bias and erode due process. You can see how this facial recognition technology perpetuated bias. Yes, are you able to understand? Next, what is the challenge of delegated legislation? Crisis governance. That means governance is mostly driven these days by crisis because crisis is happening so much. For example, COVID 19. During the pandemic, the Indian executive used broad powers under the Disaster Management Act, Epidemic Diseases Act, to issue sweeping executive orders under delegated legislation. Sweeping executive order means if you say that nobody can go out after this hour, whoever goes out, they can punish that person. These are sweeping powers. So these situations, because uh, these challenges are the new normal, that is why it is very difficult. Understood? So you are bypassing the parliament by this. Parliament only has done what? Skeletal legislation it has made. And this has eventually become normalized because this emergency model of governance, that it's an emergency, government can do anything. Now, given climate change is happening so fast, and given a lot of pandemics are also emerging, what do you say? Emergency is the new norm, and executive has taken a lot of powers under this. Extreme technicality under regulatory state. So the technicality of the functioning has increased a lot. For example, telecom, cryptocurrency, data privacy, financial markets such as SEBI regulations. So whatever regulations, for example, SEBI is making some regulations. Understood? These SEBI regulations, these are very technical in nature. They cannot be scrutinized by parliamentarians. Yes? Are you able to understand? So it's like this. The parliament is a body of generalists. It lacks the technical expertise to debate, let alone scrutinize the rules of these complex domains. This leads to abdication by default. Whatever SEBI is bringing out legislations, by default, they are not scrutinized. Because SEBI knows parliamentarians do not have the knowledge to scrutinize these things. Here, the parliament completely cedes the lawmaking power to unelected technocrats like the regulators who become the de facto lawmakers. Are you able to understand? International obligations. Now, you must have seen there are a lot of trade deals that are being signed with different countries. Free trade agreements with UK, free trade agreement negotiations with EU is going on. So, for example, these kind of trade deals or any kind of international obligation, if internationally the executive has gone, the prime minister or the cabinet minister has gone and agreed to something that India will do, now it's an obligation on the parliament to do it. Are you able to understand? That if the executive has signed a trade deal, the parliament has no other way to not do it. This is also an obligation and a problem under delegated legislation. Are you able to understand? Now, what is exactly the way forward? How do we strengthen these mechanisms? How do we ensure that legislature is the one who is making the decisions and is scrutinizing these things rather than only the executive? First is clarity in the Parent Act. Do not use is not to use vague terms. That means if the language is absolutely clear, what can be done and what cannot be done, that reduces the power of the executive to change it according to their own will. First. Second, laying procedure. This requires the executive to lay the rules it made on the table of the House. Now, the rules are simply placed in the House. This is a simple method. It is just laid before the House. Whoever wants to check it, checks it. Second is negative laying. The rules come into effect unless Parliament votes to annul them within a specific period. This is the most common thing. If the executive has made rules and Parliament is not making anything, not changing it, that means it automatically comes into force. Third is affirmative laying. The rules cannot come into effect until Parliament affirmatively votes to approve them. It's the strongest form of laying. This kind of uh, laying is required when it comes to laying before the Parliament. Affirmative laying, that whatever the executive wants to make rules, it has to be passed by the Parliament. Are you able to understand? Now, the present mechanism is Committee on Subordinate Legislation. It's the most critical parliamentary watchdog. Both the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha have this committee to scrutinize delegated legislation and report to the House. That means whatever delegated legislation is being done, there is a parliamentary uh, committee on subordinate legislation that scrutinizes these things. Its role is to check if the rule is in accordance with the act. Yes. Second, it is within the Constitution of India. It is constitutional or not. Third, whether it is imposing a tax which they need parliamentary approval for. Whatever tax the executive wants to put in, parliament has to approve it. Fourth, retrospective in effect. So it checks whether the rule is retrospective or prospective. That means if today this rule has been brought in, does it apply for things that has happened before or not? This is also checked. Fifth, ousting the jurisdiction of the court. Whether this particular regulation uh, keeps the courts away from whatever is happening. These things are checked by Parliament, the Committee on Subordinate Legislation. Second form of control over this is done by judiciary. Judicial control, the power of judicial review, which is the basic structure of the Constitution. Judicial review means whatever legislation is being passed by the Parliament or whatever rules that executive is making, all of these are open for judiciary to scrutinize and say whether something is correct or not. This is called judicial review. Judiciary has the power to review whatever is being. The judiciary acts as the ultimate check against executive overreach through the power of judicial review, the doctrine of ultra vires. That means, doctrine of ultra vires means if something is not in your power, you have done it. That means it falls under doctrine of ultra vires. A citizen can challenge a rule in court. The court can strike down that rule if it is one, substantive ultra vires. That means the rule goes beyond the scope of authority given by the Parent Act. If the Parent Act says A and you have done something called X, that means it is not in the Parent Act. You have done something else. That means doctrine of ultra vires is used. Procedural ultra vires. For example, executive has not followed the due process. This process has to be followed to do this particular job. The executive has not followed it. That's why the parliament strikes it down. Sorry, the judiciary strikes it down. What other safeguards are there? Procedural and public control. For example, of course, the parliament has put in some procedure how it is to be done, and public control. That public also scrutinizes what is being done by the executive. So public plays the role of a watchdog. Understood? Now, Lord Hayward, when he said these new despotism claims, Donoghmore Committee in the UK sat. This committee was set up to investigate Lord Hayward's new despotism claims. It concluded that delegated legislation was a necessary feature of a modern state, but recommended strengthening the safeguards. Whatever safeguards are should be strengthened, such as improving parliamentary scrutiny committees. So, such as, for example, delegated committee on subordinate legislation. It is there. So, we need to improve on that. It strongly recommended against the use of Henry's 8 clauses, that it should not be used at all. It should only be used in the rarest of circumstances. So, this is what Donaghmore Committee of UK said. Next comes second ARC's recommendation. Second ARC recommended that all draft legislation should be placed in public domain. And what other regulations are there, it should also be placed on public domain before it being implemented, so that public can check whether everything is correct or not, whether the powers are arbitrary or not. ARC emphasized that all draft legislation should be placed in public domain for a mandatory period to allow for public debate and consultation. Second, report on organizational structure. The ARC recommended a massive exercise to simplify, consolidate, and repeal the web of complex and archaic rules. It argued that sheer volume of rules make governance opaque and breeds corruption. So, whenever these procedures are very tough, it creates a problem, because this procedure is used by the administration to make life tougher for citizens. Are you able to understand? Second ARC says simplify this so that life of citizens are easier. AV Dicey was literally hostile towards delegated legislation. It said whatever should be done, it should be done by the parliament. Hence, only rule of law will stand. Else, if you give more and more power to administration, administration will be very, what do you say, will use this like a new despot. Not I want. They argued that parliamentary control is often weak. Sorry, Dicey. He saw the discretionary power it gave to the executive as a source of arbitrary rule, contrasting it with supremacy of law passed by the parliament. Basically, whenever this power is with the executive, it is arbitrary. When it is with the parliament, parliament is accountable to the people, right? Through votes. That makes them more and more accountable. That ensures rule of law. With executive, if this power stays, executive can use it anyway because they are not elected by the people. Wade and Forsyth, so they have written this under administrative law. Even A.V. Dicey has also written this under administrative. They argue that parliamentary control is weak and sporadic due to political pressure and lack of time. Therefore, the ultra vires doctrine enforced by independent judiciary is the citizen's most vital defense against bureaucratic lawmaking. They are saying without this power of judicial review, everything will become despotic. So, judiciary, a independent judiciary, protects the citizens from that arbitrary power of the bureaucracy. The way forward, of course, strengthen the committee of subordinate legislation. We have studied this to get more advisors, technical advisors. They can so that they can help the parliamentarian to come to a particular conclusion. pre-legislative consultation. Second ARC says a code of practice for consultation should be made legally binding. Basically, whatever you make, it should be legally binding for you to have a public consultation on it. For example, you open it up for public consultation for 15 days so that citizen bodies or I mean civil society organizations, they can go and scrutinize it. It wanted to prohibit skeletal legislation that don't make skeletal legislation. Introduce sunset clauses. Now, this is the best practice that is used in Australia also. Australia, it is used. Parliament should consider including sunset clauses in acts that delegate significant amount of power. This would mean the rule automatically expire after a set period, forcing Parliament to review, re-evaluate, and reauthorize them. For example, the Parliament says whatever rule is being made, uh, it'll go. I mean, the authorization has the validity of, for example, 3 years. After 3 years, the Parliament has to again evaluate it, again pass it, or 5 years, so that if the government is changing, these things are automatically uh, getting out of date. And if it is important, Parliament will pass it again. That is why. A simplification and consolidation of rules, we have studied this. Second ARC only recommended this before. Now, what are the new forms of how can we solve those new forms of technological challenges? First is empowered committees. Technical experts and data scientists should be given to, I mean, basically they want to expand the scope of committee of subordinate legislation so that it's a powerful committee, checks everything. Mandatory that any algorithm used for public decision making must have its logic published and laid before the parliament. It should be published so that, for example, there are civil society organizations who work in these regards, right? Such as Internet Freedom Foundation, things like that. So they can sit and scrutinize whether whatever the code, source code that has been laid down, is it correct or not? What are there any biases or not? So that even media can play a significant role in this. Sunset clause we have studied. Mandatory legislative consultation, that you open it for public or legislatures consolidation consultation, sorry. And a digital laying procedure. Whatever is being laid before the parliament, it should be accessible to citizens. There should be one portal for it, and it should be accessible to citizens. So these are the recommendation of how the problems arising out of delegated legislation can be solved. Let's take a 5 minutes break. Start with planning. So, just after the independence, we all know what significant progress, especially Russia, made. What significant progress Russia made. Now, while doing this progress in around 1920s, when the Russian Revolution happened, and Russia started making such progress, the problem, uh, uh, or the thing that they did was, they were a very much of an agricultural economy back then in 1920s, but using centralized planning. What is centralized planning? Government saying that okay, this much resources we have, and we'll use these resources in these sectors, and we'll carry out these activities. Now, to do such a thing, you need a powerful government cadre and a government that is willing to work for people who are very highly motivated. In this regard, how do we, uh, what do you say? If the government's if the government's focus is more on delivering, for example, industrializing an agricultural economy, so they'll use all the money that the government has, they'll use it towards industrialization. That is planning. Pre-term, you plan that for the next 5 years or the next 10 years, we'll focus only on industrialization. First, we'll industrialize, then we'll get some money out of industrialization. We'll use that money to improve healthcare and education for people, etc. etc. That is planning. Without planning, what will happen? Somebody is industrializing, somebody is focusing on improving health, somebody is not doing anything, somebody is improving prisons, somebody is improving, for example, roads. That's not a dedicated way to do things. So, Russia did, they dedicated themselves towards these long term planning of things. India wanted to do so. India, especially motivated by the ideals of two people, Subhash Chandra Bose and Jawaharlal Nehru. They wanted India to industrialize heavily and India to have heavy industries like USSR and Germany had at that time. So that they wanted whatever resources that the government has, those government resources should be used towards improving the lives of people. Yeah, improving, what do you say, lives of people by investing more in heavy industries that improves long-term prosperity of the economy. Understood? That is why after independence, planning was brought in. That 5-year plans were brought in. For this 5-year plan, we'll focus on agriculture. That India is an agricultural economy and we'll focus on improving agricultural yields. Next 5-year plan will focus on industries. We'll improve the PSUs that we have. We'll establish skill development institutions and institutions that will provide uh, in the long term skilled workforce to India. That's why IITs were established in the late 1950s. So this approach of the government that we plan whatever we want to do, we plan and we do it. It's called planning. Now, planning in India was like this 5-year plans. So 5-year plan under Indira Gandhi was that we improve credit penetration in agriculture. How do we do that? We nationalize all the banks. We nationalize the banks and we'll ask these banks to go to these rural areas and go and give out credit to people who are underserved, who do not receive credit traditionally. So we break the monopoly of money lenders in the village economy. Understood? This started changing with LPG reforms. So I'm giving you a brief overview of things. We'll study in detail these things. In LPG reforms, what happened was people were very much interested uh, in what do you say? Day to day or reacting to certain market mechanisms. For example, market is shifting towards A. That's why we shift towards A. There is no long-term 5-year planning. So, however the market behaves, government started behaving that way. 5-year plans were there on paper, but the government was more and more focused on bringing in more FDI, letting private sector do whatever they want to do, so that they increase the growth potential. Yes. Therefore, to solve this problem, uh, the planning in India was done by an institution called the Planning Commission. I discussed Planning Commission now. That it is attached to the PMO and it is like a cabinet ministry. And it creates 5-year plans for India. How those plans will be implemented, it monitors it. But the Planning Commission was a Soviet era relic that India was continuing till 2014. In 2014, it was disbanded. In 2015, a new organization was created by an executive order. It's called Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog's role is more 21st century based and more focused towards neoliberalism. It is like a policy think tank of the government. It creates policies for this particular year, this particular sector, uh, next 3 years, next 7 years, next 15 years. That means it creates long term policies, short term policies. It creates dashboards, dashboards under Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, that which particular cities are performing well. Similarly, it creates dashboards for aspirational district programs, which districts or which blocks are improving or are working very well. We make a best practice out of them. Understood? So, these dashboard systems are very much important. And these dashboard systems uh, is like a trademark of Niti Aayog. Similarly, through dashboard, they are doing what of policy making? They are doing policy monitoring. And that policy monitoring is acting as a feedback for policy making. After that, what Niti Aayog is doing is, Niti Aayog is guiding the administration the district administration, the government in a lot of things. They're guiding the administration towards new things, such as there are certain global changes that are happening, some global best practices in some country. Niti Aayog wants to bring that to India. Things like these are very much necessary. So this was the overview of how planning actually started in India and now how it looks like in India. Okay? Now let's see how the details within this. Machinery of planning. Machinery of planning in India during the planning era. What is this planning era? Pre 1991. Okay? Before LPG reforms happened. That was the planning era. Was a vast multi-tiered institutional framework designated to formulate, implement, and monitor these 5-year plans. All the 5-year plans we are creating, it is being monitored through this. What are the key components? Policy formulation, this is done by the Planning Commission. This Planning Commission was the brain behind these operations. It had a cabinet position. Planning Commission, the core think tank and brain of the planning process, responsible for drafting the plans. These 5-year plans were created by the Planning Commission. National Development Council, NDC, a high level body for securing cooperation and approval from the states. So there was a National Development Council that used to take approval from the state and coordinate with the different governments and organizations. Understood? At the union level, Union Cabinet, the final political authority that presented the plan to the Parliament. So this 5-year plan that is formulated by the Planning Commission, Union Cabinet will take it and present in the Parliament. Union ministries, they provided sectoral inputs and were responsible for implementing central components of the plan. So designated ministries, for example, 5-year plan has everything. 5-year plan has that will focus more on infrastructural development in the next 5 years, for example. Now, within infrastructure, there are a lot of things: school infrastructure, hospital infrastructure, road infrastructure, airport infrastructure, every infrastructure. So there are designated ministries for every other thing. Similarly, digital public infrastructure; these are also very much important. So uh, all kinds of ministries will be involved in this. Okay, so they will monitor these plans. Similarly, at state level, there were planning boards, state planning boards, or state planning commissions. They used to plan for the next 5 years what this particular state will focus on. State level counterparts to the planning commission responsible for drafting state specific plans. And similarly, the way union cabinet and union ministries used to work, state cabinet and state ministries work. Then at district level, there were district planning committees. We'll study district planning committees, the nuances within it. But till now, this is the framework at the national level. At the top, there was planning commission, ministries and cabinet working for it. At the state, there are state planning commissions, state government and ministries working for it. And then at the district, there was a district planning commission. So was the structure. Now, the Planning Commission. Planning Commission was established in March 1950 by an executive resolution of the Union government. It was neither a constitutional nor a statutory body. It was not created by any law of parliament, nor was it created by the constitution. Understood? It was created by an executive resolution, which like created through a delegated legislation. It was the central agency for formulating, monitoring, and evaluating the 5-year plans. It also had significant financial powers as it made recommendation to the finance ministry for plan grants to the states. Now it used to recommend to the finance ministry that okay, this is the 5-year plan, and these states will get this much amount money, this ministry will get this much amount money, etc. etc. Now imagine you are a minister under in the Congress government, finance minister, chief of Congress, the top of Congress leadership is not a prime minister. He's actually sitting in the planning commission, and in planning commission they are controlling a lot of things in the government. So as a finance minister, will you challenge that thing? No, right? You come from the same party. That party is ruling, and your party boss is asking you to do something. This was happening. This was happening with the planning commission. So finance ministry did not have any effective power. Whatever planning commission said, finance ministry implemented it. What is the composition of the planning commission? The prime minister is the ex officio chairman. Deputy chairman is usually made of a senior grad or a politician or a cabinet or an economist. It's a cabinet rank. This deputy chairman, uh, you must have heard uh, about people like Amitabh Kant. Yes? Amitabh Kant was a deputy chairman of this, of Niti Aayog. Shows it's a cabinet ministry rank. Full-time members, a group of 4 to 7 experts in fields like economics, science, and social policy are a part of this. अभी पढ़ेंगे नीति आयोग भी पढ़ेंगे और देखेंगे कितना सिमिलैरिटीज है. Good question. That is the criticism of नीति आयोग only. नाम चेंज करके एक सो बेसिकली देखो प्लानिंग कमीशन के पास बहुत ज्यादा पावर था, नीति आयोग के पास पावर. दैट इज द मेन डिफरेंस. प्लस नीति आयोग में क्या है ना, नीति आयोग ऑल top level professionals are called to नीति आयोग for their expert input. I mean, खैर वो प्लानिंग कमीशन भी करती थी, बट प्लानिंग कमीशन it became a parallel government altogether. जब प्लानिंग कमीशन डिसबैंड हुई, imagine how many employees were there. How much is written? How much we studied right now? 4 to 7 people, ex officio chairman. Things. Imagine how much was the amount of people that were working in the planning commission. How much? Take a guess. 4,000 people. Can imagine. I mean, it was a what do you say? It was a place filled with nepotism, favoritism, everything. There is a book written by Shrayana Bhattacharya. Shrayana Bhattacharya. The name is of the book is it's about Shah Rukh Khan, desperately seeking Shah Rukh. It's a book written. Shrayana Bhattacharya is an economist. Shrayana Bhattacharya in that book will discuss about a few things, such as she in that book she goes to meet some friends in Delhi, and those people were working in the planning commission. They and Shriyana Bhattacharya was a self-made economist. I mean, read in all good institutions around the world, and she was working hard to make a career in economics. But especially, she criticized people who had top level contacts, were sons and daughters of politicians. Uh, they directly used to be placed in the planning commission, and they used to enjoy life there, all benefits of the government, everything. Plus, uh, I mean, they get to live in Delhi. So, and they sit and decide a lot of things that is actually is implemented in the grassroots. Shrana Bhattacharya says these people actually sitting in the highest elite circles in national capital have never been to the grassroots, and still they are being made part of the grassroots level policy making. It's called ivory tower approach. We'll study that. It's a criticism of the planning commission. So Shrana Bhattacharya in that book will has written about all of these things. Desperately seeking Shahrukh. You guys should read that. Give that book a read sometime. Are any of you Shahrukh fans here? No? Little bit, eh? You haven't seen peak Shahrukh, I believe, of early 2000s. Hmm? That era. Crazy stardom. Bhai. Now, what are the functions that planning commission is doing? Assessment. That means how much wealth does nation have? How much mines do you have? How much natural resources can we mine? Like that. Formulation. How to use these resources basically. That was the formulation part of it. Allocation. Allocating grants to different state governments, different ministries, etc., etc. Monitoring. Monitor the progress of the plans and identify implementation bottlenecks. Whatever implementation is to be done, it is identified through this. Advisory. They act as think tank. Everything Niti Aayog. Criticism. Whenever you write, wherever you can, use such names of scholars. K. Santanam, he famously uses planning commission as something called a super cabinet, where the party high command sits and takes decision. The planning commission, an unelected body, became more powerful than the statutory cabinet, encroaching on its policy making and financial function. Are you able to understand? Second, ivory tower planning. Criticized for being top-down, centralized body of technocrats in Delhi who were disconnected from ground realities. Everything that Shrana Bhattacharya will say. You can actually write Shrana Bhattacharya's name here as a scholar because she is an economist. I mean, you can. I won't. You can actually write. Shreyana Bhattacharya. Economist. Undermined federalism. It used its financial leverage to impose one size fits for all model on states, reducing them to supplicants for funds and stifling local innovation. Any decision making that used to be done. Now, this is the problem with planning commission, which Niti Aayog will solve. Niti Aayog will change a lot of things. So, I mean, you just wait for it. But the structure, of course, looks like Niti Aayog, but Niti Aayog will change a lot of things apart from the criticism aside. Planning commission, what used to do? Any local plans were there. Planning commission, whatever it used to decide, it used to decide sitting in Delhi. Very much centralized planning. So one size fits all approach for the whole country. So in a such a diverse country like India, with such huge geography and population, this attitude, this approach was not very good. Understood? Second ARC implicitly criticized this centralized model, advocating for a citizen centric, decentralized, and flatter organizational structure, which the Planning Commission was the antithesis of. Second ARC is saying that we want more decentralized planning. Organization should be more flatter. Planning Commission was opposite of that. It was sitting at top and it was controlling everything. From district administration to central ministries to state governments, it was controlling everything. It was like the most powerful institution in the country without being elected nor being selected. It was so people there, they were politicians or the who's who of politicians. That's why you are, if you are good with the party high command, you get top level posts like that. Planning commission. So that's why these are the criticisms. Huh? I mean, of course, the people there who used to work, these are criticisms aside. In 70 years, India made significant amount of progress. Plus, India stayed together. There was no internal rebellion that took out, uh, that separated India, things like that. Of course, the people sitting in planning commissions are not dumb or anything. There were smart people who were sitting in planning commission. There were some people who were dead rubber or dead wood, as you say. But that's in every organization. For example, this organization or any other organization you pick, there will be some people, they are not contributing a lot. So that is why such, I mean, any institution you take, this happens. In present Niti Aayog also, not everybody would be working very well. Not everybody would there only by merit. But most of the people, a lot of people there were especially professionals, especially economists, things like that. Contek Singh Ahluwalia, economist, he used to head this particular thing. So these are, of course, very smart, very capable people. But the structure of planning commission was such, it was a threat. It was a threat to a lot of functioning of the government. That's right. National Development Council or NDC was set up in August 1952 also by a executive resolution. It was established to act as the highest platform for deliberation and to secure the cooperation of states in the planning process. It was meant to be the real forum for cooperative federalism in the planning era. Its approval was necessary for a plan to be implemented. Basically, it was like a place where all the ministries and all the states can come together and interact with each other and carry forward the plan. Planning Commission is formulating it, National Development Council is facilitating it. So just a platform. But power behind everything was Planning Commission. Composition, who is within this National Development Council? Prime Minister, all Union Cabinet Minister, all Chief Ministers of State, administrators of Union Territory, and members of the Planning Commission. Understood? Functions to prescribe guidelines for the formulation of the national plan. To consider the draft national plan as formulated by the Planning Commission. For example, you discuss the national plan for the next 5 years that was there in the plan, that was made by the Planning Commission, and you find ways how to implement it, how to follow the orders of the Planning Commission. To give final approval of the plan. So, final approval is given by National Development Council with all states participating. But Who is behind all of this? The Planning Commission. To review the working of the plan from time to time and recommend measures for its success. Whatever is written in terms, whatever is written here, did not used to happen actually. Everything was effectively controlled by Planning Commission. Niti Aayog's governing council, which has similar composition, Niti Aayog's governing council has similar people: Prime Minister, Union Council of Ministers, states, state finance minister, state chief ministers are being represented there. So these things are there. Niti Aayog's governing council has a similar composition to NDC, and NDC is the spiritual successor. So Niti Aayog is the spiritual successor to National Development Council. It's governing council of Niti Aayog. So they combined it. Uh, so Niti Aayog oversees all of these functions. So you understand how planning era started? You understood why this planning commission was created, what was the role of the planning commission, and National Development Council, how this functioned. Indicative planning. This represents the philosophical shift in India's planning. Imperative planning. This was the initial model borrowed from Soviet Union. This means what? Imperative planning is like the 5-year plan we used to make. That is the definition of imperative planning. This was the initial model borrowed from the Soviet Union. The state commanded the economy, set rigid targets, especially for the public sector, and used licensing, the license Raj, to force the private sector to comply. So government said that this is the things we'll work on, and these are how things will happen. Now, indicative planning after 1991 to present. India formally shifted to indicative planning with 8th 5-year plan. Remember this 5-year plan? Immediately after the LPG reforms. This model, the state does not command, it just indicates which side to go to. What is imperative? Something that is bound to happen. What is indicative? That means to show the way. So, NPM and good governance started during this. Role of the state? State sets broad macroeconomic targets and indicates its priorities. Example, we want to grow our renewable energy sector. So this is government is saying that we want to grow renewable energy, and we will give tax breaks, things like that, to whoever wants to do it. So private sector automatically goes towards that, and government backing gives it a tailwind to succeed. It then uses policy instruments like tax breaks, subsidies, or R&D funding to encourage the private sector to invest in those areas rather than forcing them. Okay? Shift in focus. The private sector is seen as the primary engine of growth, and state's role shifts from being a provider to a facilitator and regulator. Okay? You understand the difference between indicative planning and imperative planning. Imperative, state was actually acting upon it and making the private sector act upon it. Now state just indicates that we are moving towards this. You can come along or you can continue whatever you are doing. That's why state has lesser control uh, or lesser coercive control over the private sector. Now, what are the process of this planning that was happening? See, first is approach paper. The planning commission would first draft an approach paper setting out the broad goals, targets, and size of plans. What exactly do you want to do? The motivation to do something. NDC's approval. This approach paper was debated and approved by the National Development Council. So this is the actual process of how it is happening. Draft plan. So these are the words that are used in your syllabus. Uh, that's why we are studying this. Based on approved approach, the planning commission would draft a detailed plan in consultation with union ministries and state governments. Next step is state plans. State planning boards would draft their own state level plans. Critically, these plans were often vertical designated to fit into priorities set by planning commission. Whatever planning commission has said these things will happen, states used to make plans according to whatever the planning commission has said. No freedom, I mean, effectively, no freedom was given to states. Designated to fit into the priorities set by planning commission to ensure maximum plan grants. Rather than being horizontal, that means if the planning commission wants something, that will happen, whether the local area needs it or not. So rather than being conducive towards the local area needs, this was much different than that. The planning commission would then integrate the sectoral. That means every ministry will have a sectoral plan. Infrastructure have a sectoral plan. Home ministry will have a sectoral plan. Agriculture ministry will have a sectoral plan. All of them will be integrated into a final draft plan. The final draft plan was presented to the Union Cabinet and then to the National Development Council for final approval. After the approval, the plan was tabled in the Parliament for discussion, most importantly, but it was not subjected to a vote as it is not a legislative bill. It was debated in the Parliament. Parliament had no right to vote on it. Now you can see what the problem is. What the Parliament did not have any control over this. So this was the problem. No. That's why Niti Aayog is much, much better than this. Structure is similar, everything is similar, but the functioning is very much different. Constitutional amendment and decentralized planning. So this was a landmark attempt to reverse the top-down planning model. 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act brought in panchayats and urban local governments to India. Okay? With this, what happened is local areas and local population got some amount of political power and they wanted to be a part of governance. So that is why it became very much important to make them a part of planning. These specific articles empowered local bodies to prepare and implement plans for economic development and social justice in their local areas. This was the first step, taking away power from the planning commission. Second, 11th and 12th schedule listed 29 rural and 18 urban functions to be devolved to them. So there are union list and state list, we know, concurrent lists there are different functions for these different bodies. In this case, however, 11th and 12th schedule listed certain functions, and they were directly given out to these local governments. These local governments, these panchayats, will have these functions such as sanitation, uh, cleanliness around the area, small water supply, things like that. They'll have power over these things. Local roads, primary health. And with this, there was an important part formed called the District Planning Committee, or DPC. Article 243ZD of the 74th Amendment mandates the creation of District Planning Committee in every district. The District Planning Committee is legally responsible for consolidating the plans prepared by the panchayats and municipalities in the district and preparing a draft district plan for the entire district. So, District Planning Committee will bring whatever the plans all the panchayats and municipalities have made. They'll combine them. They'll see whatever. Now, planning is done at what level? At district level, planning is done. What this district needs, what this panchayat needs, what that panchayat needs. It's done at the district level through this. Composition, the act mandates that at least 4/5 of the DPC member must be elected representatives from Zilla Parishad and municipalities. So 80% should be from Zilla Parishad or municipalities. They are elected members. So what are these Zilla Parishad and municipalities? So from panchayats, you get elected to block samiti. From block samiti, all of the block samiti, what do you say? They elect Zilla Parishad members, and from those Zilla Parishad members, they become part of this district planning committee. Understood? Now, okay, we'll discuss that under district administration. Now, under planning only, let's study Niti Aayog, and questions are directly asked on Niti Aayog, and they are asked in comparative to the planning commission. So you need to study this. Under this unit, only that part is important. Rest is just I have covered because syllabus mentions those words. Okay. Effectively, you will be asked what is the present role of Niti Aayog, issues and challenges with Niti Aayog, how it is different from planning commission, what problems planning commission had that Niti Aayog is solving. You use these things. In 2014, there was an abolition of 65-year-old Planning Commission and its replacement with Niti Aayog, National Institution for Transforming India. It was not just a change of name, it represented a fundamental shift to development from centralized planning to decentralized policy era. From planning to policy. Policy is what? Policy can be day to day. Policy can be short term. Policy can be long term. Policy is receptive to the changing world order. Policy is much more market or backed by the market. So why do we need to abolish the planning commission? First, mismatch with market economy. Market economy functions with demand and supply, not by what state asks to do. So the structure of planning commission was very much focused on command economy structure. It had to be gone. Second, it's top down and one size fits for all approach. So this was a problem because Decentralized governance was not happening very well. Third, erosion of federalism. Ah, the planning commission, an unelected body, became a super cabinet that K. Santhanam is saying that undermined the federal structures. Chief ministers were often reduced to supplicants visiting the Yojana Bhavan. Yojana Bhavan was where planning commission used to sit to beg for funds, which also weakened the constitutional role of the finance commission. Read Article 280 under this. So, for everything that a state wanted, the chief minister used to go sit before the planning commission, ask for funds, extra funds, allocation. It used to happen. That was the problem. Bureaucratic inertia. It had become a large, cumbersome bureaucracy focused more on resource allocation and process than outcomes and innovation. All some of the favorite bureaucrats were appointed here, and they used to work accordingly. And it created a parallel bureaucracy altogether. How Niti Aayog changed it? See, of course, both were think tanks, but for points, you write they centralized, focused on centralized planning. These people are more decentralized and provide technical expertise and policy advice. Planning Commission also used to do that. But for the sake of it, answer, you write these points. Top-down planning, here there is a more bottom-up approach. Niti Aayog allows the decentralized small civil society organizations, small district governments, state governments to give their inputs. That is the role. Bottom up approach. Immense financial clout. It had the power to allocate funds for those plans. This planning commission had. Niti Aayog has no financial powers. No financial powers. States here are treated as equal partners because there is a governing council where there is a prime minister and all uh, chief ministers and what do you say, LGs, and they work in policy making and coordination. The rigid 5-year plans, here there is no rigidity. There can be long-term documents, short-term documents, whatever you want to. But there can be vision documents, what do you say, India 2047, these kind of documents are there. So in the early 2020s, you must be remembering there was a lot of talk about India 2020. Especially in schools, you must have seen that we used to imagine that when India becomes 2020, something, I mean, a lot of development will happen, things will happen. When 2020 came, the next target was India 2047. This is how the goal shifts every time. Now, another question will be asked under this topic. Other 10 marker it can be asked. Something about cooperative and competitive federalism. Cooperative and competitive federalism. Just remain. So cooperative federalism means what? There is a federal structure, states and the union government. What would cooperative federalism would mean? Naturally, English. Hmm? They're cooperating, yes. This that they're cooperating with each other. For example, we are studying in class. If we do not cooperate with each other, there might be friction happen. Class won't run smoothly. There is another thing called competitive federalism. That means states are made to compete with each other. You must be seeing that if a company or a semiconductor company, recently you must have heard the news, semiconductor company wants to come and manufacture in Maharashtra. Gujarat will start pulling that project towards that side. Especially Gujarat does that. Similarly, uh, these states are competing to get investors. That lot of investors are to be brought in. Such things, uh, I mean, such structures. You must be seeing these investor summits, especially in Telangana, Orissa, Andhra Pradesh, West Bengal. They want to bring in investors, and they are competing against each other for these investors. Andhra Pradesh will say that okay, come and build a plant here. Orissa will say no, come and build a plant here. We'll give you cheaper electricity, more land, etc., etc. So the states are competing with each other to achieve developmental indicators. Yes, to get more investment in this case. Similarly, competitive federalism also means whenever, what do you say? Whenever particular developmental indicators are there. For example, Niti Aayog has this dashboard where every state's rank is there. For example, in healthcare, who has the top rank, who has the bottom rank. So every year, who has improved how much, that is also shown. So states have a ranking, and citizens now see whether their states are progressing or not. So state governments are competing against each other to achieve developmental indicators. You will understand? Cooperative federalism. The governing council is the primary platform for shaping national policy in partnership with the states. Yeah. Competitive federalism. For example, Niti Aayog uses data to foster healthy competition among states, such as indices and rankings. Sustainable Development Goals India Index. Which state is improving the best in terms of sustainable development goals? Which state is empowering this? Hmm? Sorry, which state is empowering themselves in these indicators? Okay? So that, for example, Bihar has made significant progress in this particular thing. So their rank will improve. This shows it's a good feeling for people there. So this name and shame and name and fame approach nudges the states to improve their performance and learn from each other. From tomorrow, let's say I start, okay, all of you will write answers. The lowest three I'll name them, and the top three I'll name them. That means nobody would want to stay in lowest three, right? So that means uh, this will inherently create competition amongst you to get to the top. But in the long run, everybody is improving, right? That is the end goal, right? Everybody means every state should improve, and if every state is improving in their own capacity, India is improving. That is the main goal. So that is the logic of competitive federalism. Competitive federalism and cooperative federalism will be asked in GS2 and in public administration. Okay? You need to answer very well. Niti Aayog acts as the policy and knowledge hub. You all know they have knowledge and policy and expertise about things. And their focus is more on bottom-up approach. Now the question part. Questions about Niti Aayog. First, they'll ask you what is the role of Niti Aayog. You need to know the role of Niti Aayog. Then challenges in terms of whatever Niti Aayog is doing, what are issues arising out of these Niti Aayogs. Multifaceted role of Niti Aayog. One is policy formulation and strategic planning for the next 5 years, or the next 10 years, or next till 2047. What is the long term strategic plan? For example, increasing capital expenditure so that we build more roads, infrastructure, things like that, so that production increases. This is also a focus. This is called strategic planning. For example, in agriculture, Niti Aayog's advocacy for APMC Act. This was the model, and also Model Contract Farming Act. So it wants to introduce things like contract farming so that income of farmers increases significantly. Now, indicative planning is happening rather than what was the previous one? Imperative planning. Indicative planning is happening. Strategic foresight is happening. It promotes cooperative and competitive federalism. You understand? An example, the best example of this is aspirational district program. So aspirational district program focuses on rapid transformation of 112 underdeveloped districts through a convergence of central and state schemes. So Niti Aayog focuses on all of these 112 particular districts so that development is rapidly happening in these districts. If it is happening in the most underdeveloped parts of India, that means automatically the other parts will start developing. Development indicators will be much more higher. So now you can see how it is much different than planning commission. Planning commission was more of a power center. It's more of a servant of governance to people. Now, so with every role they have, we'll discuss an issue, whatever the issue is. So Louis Tillin, under cooperative federalism, she says initiatives like the aspirational district program is a form of executive federalism. That means executives are exercising a lot of control on how governance is happening, not the district planning committee, etc., etc. This is a criticism of this. Catalyzing economic reforms, such as strategic disinvestment of private sectors or public sector enterprises, sorry, PSUs, such as Air India, disinvestment of Air India. This was all given by Niti Aayog, that how to do it. Design and advocacy of GST. How to design GST, how to improve GST, what are changes do we need to make under GST. It is done by Niti Aayog. Monitoring and evaluation. So whatever is happening under aspirational district program, Niti Aayog is monitoring it. Right? So the way policy monitoring happens is monitoring the same thing. Real-time dashboard that tracks 49 KPIs. KPIs are key performance indicators. 49 KPIs across 5 sectors. In the district of, so you don't give district specific examples. You just say that using KPIs, it is monitoring the day-to-day development. Every month, it is seeing how development is happening. It fosters innovation and entrepreneurship. How? new schemes such as Atal Tinkering Labs or Atal Innovation Challenge. So these things are being implemented in schools, and Niti Aayog is ensuring these things are implemented. So it is the one who is implementing formulating the policy, uh, and it is monitoring the policy, and it is improving the policy through those monitoring also. So that is how Niti Aayog is playing a key role in a day-to-day basis. These are different dimensions that I have written. It is also the nodal agency for sustainable development goals. That Niti Aayog ensures sustainable development goal is followed. How so? By creating that dashboard and ranking everybody that who is performing how well in which sustainable development goals. So states take these things seriously. The annual SDG India Index and dashboard competitively ranks states and union territories on their performance. And whenever the media highlights it, people see how their own state government is working as compared to other states' government. Localization of SDGs. That means whenever you SDGs are decided by, I mean, international institution has decided this sustainable development goal. Localization of SDGs means Niti Aayog is taking these SDGs to local levels. People are understanding these things. Infrastructural development it is focusing on or playing a key role, such as national infrastructure pipeline. It is playing a key role in devising and what do you say? For example, things such as Pradhan Mantri Gati Shakti, national monetization pipeline. So whatever infrastructure India has or India is building, the real time. So India had a problem of what? The infrastructure project will be started, but it will go on for the next 40 years. This was the problem. We weren't able to deliver timely. Niti Aayog monitors the delivery. Health and education reforms. It provides strategic input to improve the quality and accessibility of these critical social sectors, such as Ayushman Bharat Yojana. So these are all monitored by Niti Aayog. That means whenever writing what is the role of Niti Aayog, you write a multifaceted things. Imagine what all ministries are there. So under what ministries, what important schemes are there? Just put Niti Aayog's name in all of it. Now, the questions that are asked or issues are of course role of Niti Aayog we have studied. Now challenges or issues related to Niti Aayog's existence. How Niti Aayog is behaving like a super cabinet. How? First, it does not have any constitutional status. So we do not exactly know what are its powers and what are not its powers. Plus, without constitutional backing, Niti Aayog does not have the authority to implement things or ask organization to implement. Centralization of power. See, Professor Tillin's idea will apply here also. Executive federalism. That executive is becoming the nodal agency that is driving federalism across India. So Niti Aayog's meetings are often chaired by prime ministers with direct involvement from the PMO. That means the council of ministers are overshadowed when the prime minister is there. So that is why it's a symbol of centralization of power. That is why it is acting as a super cabinet. There is a lack of financial power. So because Niti Aayog does not have any financial power of its own, it cannot ask other organization or other institution function accordingly. Professor Y.K. Alag, Without power of the purse, Niti Aayog recommendation lacked the necessary weight to ensure implementation. Who had the power of the purse? The Planning Commission had it. It was a problem. But when writing Niti Aayog's criticism, you can write this as the criticism. This is another issue. Overlap and institutional turf. The function of Niti Aayog often overlaps with those of other government ministries. Obviously, because whatever Niti Aayog is doing, it is taking power over these other ministries or encroaching upon their jurisdiction. That's why the problem of turf war, is happening. Understood? See, National Nutrition Mission or Poshan Abhiyan, led by Niti Aayog, involves coordination with multiple ministries, including Ministry of Health, Women and Child Welfare, Education, things like this. So these things, because there are a lot of players involved, it slows down the implementation process also. Perception bias is there. State governments think that Niti Aayog is acting or working only for the central government. That's the problem. Lack of accountability. Have you heard his name? Professor Jean Dreze, an economist, works with Amartya Sen also. Because it's an advisory body, it does not have direct accountability. So whatever it is asking the government to do, the people can't hold Niti Aayog accountable for it. So it has a lot of recommendation authority, and those recommendations are taken seriously, but it has no accountability. It is difficult to assess the impact of Niti Aayog's initiative and hold the institution responsible for the outcome. If something goes wrong, who holds Niti Aayog accountable? Nobody. Nobody can hold it accountable. Professor Jean Dreze critique focuses on technocratic top-down and unaccountable nature of Niti Aayog's functioning. Niti Aayog is sitting in Delhi and monitoring a lot of things and giving inputs. Niti Aayog is not functioning on ground. This criticism continues of top-down approach. Jean Dreze argues that its emphasis on data dashboard, rankings, indices promotes a form of governance by spreadsheets. That in a particular spreadsheet, you just know that okay, these things are happening. You do not know what actually is happening on ground. If something cannot be reduced to data, that means you do not know whether these things are happening. For example, in this particular district, development is happening, but religious bigotry is increasing. Even though there has been no riots, religious bigotry is increasing. Does the data show that? No, right? But that's an important factor. In the long term, businesses will suffer, development will suffer, human development will suffer, law and order will suffer, safety of women will suffer, children will suffer things like these will happen, right? So governance by spreadsheet is a problem because it can be disconnected from ground realities. This heavily quantitative focus often leads to target oriented approach that can distort priorities or ignore the qualitative aspects of development. Quality of development is. Yeah, these are all covered. See, 3-year action plan. Actually, these are not needed. I'll remove all of these things. Extra things. Limited stakeholder engagement. So there are a lot of student unions, teachers unions, labor unions that are there. Draft National Education Policy, which was reviewed and promoted by Niti Aayog, faced criticism for not adequately involving these teaching unions, student unions, and grassroots activists, things like that. It was just recommended by a committee. Niti Aayog molded it and they gave it out. Inconsistent influence. Now, Niti Aayog's recommendation are sometimes followed, sometimes not followed, and because Niti Aayog does not have a lot of power, influence is very inconsistent. Digital India campaign was strongly backed by Niti Aayog, especially in the early stages. But its influence got varied because eventually some other organization took over, some other ministry took over the lead role in this. So Niti Aayog does not have a coherent role in everything. So that is another criticism. Welfare state issues. Professor Prabhat Patnaik is an economist, argues that replacement of the Planning Commission with Niti Aayog represents a formal abandonment of state-led development and complete surrender to neoliberal economic agenda. Basically, it is saying the state was leading development, so we knew that uh, the priority of the state is to promote welfare state, promote a welfare approach. But because we have given up on this, uh, it is a complete surrender to neoliberal ideas, market-led development. We don't know whether actually it is beneficial for people or not. So this was what Prabhat Patnaik is arguing. See, NPM will apply, indicative planning. Good governance will apply. A lot of people are being. It's a more participatory approach. Collaborative federalism. I mean, uh, collaborative collaborative federalism is more like cooperative federalism. You can just remove it. Not necessary. Second. See, second ARC will say, of course, second ARC, whenever it gave recommendations, Niti Aayog wasn't there, but it gave certain recommendations for planning commission that will apply here. Define the core functions of each ministry and department to avoid the problem of turf war we discussed. So there will be no turf war because everything that they do is defined. Second, strong institutional mechanisms for intergovernmental coordination. So it wanted to create a constitutional authority or to strengthen the constitutional authority under interstate councils. Article 263. This is what Niti Aayog wanted to strengthen. Do not make a parallel institution. Strengthen the constitutional mechanism that there is. Uh, Create autonomous think tanks with legal status to ensure continuity beyond political cycle. This is what also Niti Aayog will say. For example, you create, uh, for example, so for every sector you have created a think tank and legally recognized, and they are independent in nature. They can criticize the government, they can do anything the government wants, they want to do. So even if the government changes, these think tanks are there and their policies are being implemented. So these are the things that are there. Plans and priorities we have done. Tomorrow, what we'll have to do? State government and administration. Long class, man. Rabai Singh, very long. So, do you guys have a group or something?